Hello everyone, my name is Brenna Dunlap and this is my older adult oral presentation video. So the developmental stage that I wanted to focus on for this presentation is stage 7, and stage 7 focuses on generativity versus stagnation in adulthood. So essentially this is when individuals will either look beyond themselves and focus on the people around them and their well-being instead of just their own well-being, or they become pretty self-absorbed and stagnated. So first and foremost, I wanted to say that the individual that I decided to interview for this presentation is my great aunt. So these are her important experiences during the specific stage that we're focusing on for this presentation. So her former husband randomly left her after her 50th birthday, and that was a very big experience that she dealt with during this stage. This divorce that happened suddenly just felt very scammed, is what she told me in the interview, just because of how calculated the divorce came off as, because he asked for a divorce 3 days after their youngest daughter's 18th birthday. And it just came off as a bit calculated. And there was also this added layer of stress because of her ex-husband being the brother of my great aunt's brother-in-law. So her brother-in-law being my grandfather, and her ex-husband being the brother to my grandfather. So it was just a lot of kind of just this weird, unique layer of added stress to this entire situation. So this sudden divorce definitely rocked our family. So there was depression that she dealt with after the sudden divorce, naturally, because this is a traumatic experience. So she did deal with some depression after that. But, she kind of turned that around and she was able to just focus on her family and work for her nephew, my uncle, at his business for around 7 years. So some challenges and accomplishments during this specific stage. Of course, the sudden divorce and depression, but also I wanted to focus on her accomplishments as well. So her daughter's accomplishments are what she felt as well. So in the interview, she had told me that her biggest accomplishment is her daughters and their accomplishments. So anything that her daughters accomplish, she kind of feels that as an accomplishment as well. So, for example, her youngest daughter graduating from college, graduating with her bachelor's degrees and master's degrees. So that was an accomplishment that she felt. And also her oldest daughter starting a family. Working for her nephew, that was an accomplishment, I would say. Becoming passionate about family genealogy was a big one. She got really passionate about just uncovering our family history and being able to teach that to the next generation, to me and my cousins, as well as meeting her new husband and remarrying. So for the psychosocial crisis, I wanted to focus on her sudden divorce and her life after this divorce. So in this stage, as I talked about earlier, this is when a person can develop into having strong generative interest, or they can become self-absorbed or stagnated. And also in a study that I got to read that was on divorce in mid to older adults, it talked about how mental and physical health issues happened after divorce and how divorce led to that. And I figured that would be a result just because of how stressful divorce can be on an individual and how remarriage can improve those ailments and kind of turn that around for the individual. So unfortunately, the study found that remarriage rates for women tend to be a lot lower than for men. Or compared to men, excuse me. So it's not common that women will remarry, so they won't be able to get to experience an improvement in mental or physical health. But fortunately for my great aunt, she was able to remarry, and, the depression and all that subsided when she was able to just move on with her life and become happy and active again. But even though she wasn't seeking to remarry, it just kind of happened. So it's a positive for sure. So just looking at some factors and events that helped or inhibited the resolution of this crisis. So my interviewee, she grew up in, and lived in this idyllic life, a few hours outside of Seattle, and just surrounded by nature and being able to like ride horses and just spend a lot of quality time with her family. She grew up in a very close-knit Italian, Sicilian, American middle-class family. Her parents, were married, and she had two older siblings, an older brother and an older sister, and they were just all very close. At 7 years old, she moved from Washington State to Maryland because of her dad's job being transferred to Baltimore. And, this is a tough move for anyone, but especially at 7 years old, this would feel very tough because, you're leaving behind your friends and, the memories that you had in Washington and, or that she had in Washington. And, and she had never really been to Maryland before. So it was just all very new for her. And they also had to leave their family dog behind in Washington. So that was very tough. But once they, got settled in Baltimore and she was able to make friends, and her mom actually bought her a horse because she grew up loved to ride horses. So her mom got her a horse to kind of help ease that transition. So after she got the horse, she was pretty much good to go. She grew up with a strong faith in God, and this really helped her during periods in her life where she was struggling or dealing with stress. She graduated from high school and college, and she worked as a medical secretary for the majority of her career. She got to see just how generous and kind and supportive her family was to not only their family, but other people that they didn't even know. For example, her uncle, my great-great-uncle, he didn't have any kids, but he decided to build an orphanage in Sicily, I believe in Cefalù in Sicily, after World War II, just because, after World War II, there was just so many issues and people needing things, around the world. And he decided to build this orphanage just to help the kids over there in Sicily. And there's actually a statue of him that's still standing over there just to kind of honor him for what he did. She also had a lot of friends, and she still keeps in touch with them. Her friends from school, she still keeps in touch and still has that social bond with them. And her overall goal was just to be the best mother she could be. She wasn't really career focused. She was more so focused on just being just a good mom. Some support that really helped her reach this crisis resolution. Definitely, again, this family support from being in a large family. We have a huge family. Her older sister, my grandmother, had 8 kids, and my mother is actually the oldest of those 8 kids. So we have a very large family, which means more people to support you through the good times and the bad times. And having that Italian Sicilian culture as well, and having those moral values. And in our family, we have this family motto of perseverando, and that means to persevere and just keep moving. Even through tough times, you keep going. Church and just having the strong faith in God definitely helps support her in reaching this resolution of this crisis. Her lifelong friends that she had to play games with and just hang out with was a great source of support. And lastly, the Single Again group for adults that she became a part of. And this was a group for adults that were single again, maybe from a divorce like my interviewee, or, being widowed. This is actually where she met her second husband. So now I'm going to focus on an additional theory. So the additional theory I wanted to focus on for this presentation is the ecological theory. And the main idea of this theory is that we as people, we're in charge of our own development, and how we perceive everything in our environments and, various scenarios. can positively or negatively affect the well-being of us. So in this theory, people acquire transactions, which essentially are exchanges that we have between each other, whether they're positive or negative. We have inputs. So this is when we're receiving energy from someone or something. So like family support, support from friends, education even. Outputs, this is when we're expending energy on someone or something. So maybe volunteering time at church or time spent caring for a sick relative. In this theory, adaptability and also coping, these are both our key ideas with the ecological theory. So I wanted to kind of use the ecological theory to kind of just use as a perspective when looking at my interviewee. So some inputs would be support from family and friends, as well as education. Outputs could be time spent dealing with the divorce, time spent caring for family, like grandkids, her daughters, nieces, nephews, etc. Time spent on hobbies like genealogy. She has this big passion for uncovering our family history and just being able to pass that on. Having to adapt to different life changes was a big one. Moving across the country, that's a huge life change. Switching schools is big life change as well. When she switched schools from post moving across the country, her first school in Baltimore was a school with nuns in the classrooms. And if she did something that the nun didn't like or did something wrong, the nun would hit her on the back of the hand with a ruler. And so this really scared my great aunt and kind of made her fearful to go to school. So once she switched schools, that definitely helped with adapting as well. Life after divorce, she definitely had to adapt to. Her mom passing away suddenly from a brain aneurysm, I believe. That was something that she had to adapt to, as well as her second husband passing away from prostate cancer. She knew that would be inevitable just because while they spent about 20 years together, he was about 20 years older than her. So she knew that the likelihood of him passing away before her was greater. And some transactions. So I wanted to focus on some positive transactions. She had positive transactions with her family growing up, and they really helped shape her development and just a strong desire to give back because she described her family and also her friends as just being a helping hand, and she couldn't have done anything without them. So, that positive transaction really did a lot of good for her development. So when discussing Erikson's theory limitations, there are a few that I want to focus on. The first main one is that it can be really challenging to put people into boxes or the stages of development that he created, because people, we're multifaceted individuals and we have so many different layers and differences, and it's really hard to just simply put everybody in a box because we are all very different. And the other idea that I wanted to focus on was just cultural norms and how cultures may view the stages a lot differently than Erikson and happening at different times compared to when Erikson says that they were to happen or were supposed to happen. And an example of this would be in my family. I would argue that stage 7 could happen earlier because in my family and this, in Italian Sicilian culture, it's very common to just be very passionate about looking at people beyond yourself and having a strong desire for generativity compared to other cultures. Maybe other cultures may not focus on that as much as Italian Sicilian cultures do. So I would say that, my family, that stage 7 would happen a lot earlier as compared to other people. Maybe for other people, other groups, stage 7 could be seen as happening, a lot later. And these are the references that I used. And thank you all so much for watching my video.